Hunting had always been my escape, a chance to immerse myself in nature and leave behind the chaos of everyday life. This time, I had chosen to explore the vast and dense forests near Mio, Michigan. The area was known for its rugged terrain and abundant wildlife, perfect for a few days of solitude and adventure. I parked my truck at the edge of the forest, then strapped on my gear and ventured into the wilderness. The canopy above was thick, casting a cool shadow over the forest floor. I walked for hours, navigating through the underbrush and listening to the symphony of nature. The calls of distant birds and the rustling of small animals in the undergrowth kept me company. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows through the trees, I found a spot to set up my camp. I had just finished pitching my tent when I noticed the sky darkening rapidly. Thick, black clouds rolled in, and the air grew heavy and oppressive. A sense of unease settled over me. This was more than just a typical storm. Then, the wind began to howl. Within minutes, the forest erupted into chaos. The winds were ferocious, bending the tallest trees and snapping branches like twigs. I grabbed my gear and took cover behind a large fallen log, hoping to ride out the storm. But this was no ordinary storm. It was a tornado tearing through the forest with a fury I'd never witnessed. Amidst the roar of the wind and the crashing of trees, a different sound reached my ears. It was a scream. It was unlike anything I'd ever heard, a deep, guttural wail that sent chills down my spine. Instinctively, I knew it wasn't human. Despite the raging storm, my curiosity and concern drove me to investigate. I fought my way through the wind and debris, moving toward the source of the scream. The forest was a war zone, trees uprooted, and the ground littered with branches. Then, I saw a massive tree had fallen, and its thick trunk had something pinned beneath it. I edged closer, my heart pounding in my chest. Struggling under the weight of the tree was a creature I never believed existed. It was a Bigfoot. Its fur was matted and soaked. Eyes were wide with pain and fear. The creature's sheer size and power were evident, but it was trapped, unable to free itself. Before I could react, more figures emerged from the forest. They moved with a grace and speed that belied their massive frames. A family of Bigfoot, their expressions a mix of concern and determination. They communicated with each other through a series of strange vocalizations and gestures, coordinating their efforts to lift the tree. I watched in awe as they worked together as a team. Their strength and unity was mesmerizing. The largest of the group, presumably the leader, positioned itself at the base of the tree, while the others took strategic places along the trunk. With a synchronized effort, they heaved the tree upward, freeing the trapped Bigfoot. The injured creature slowly rose to its feet, leaning on its family for support. Their relief and affection were palpable, and for a moment I felt like an intruder witnessing an intimate family moment. One of the Bigfoot, perhaps sensing my presence, turned its gaze towards me. Our eyes met, and I felt an unspoken understanding pass between us. In that instant, the forest seemed to quiet, the storm's fury dissipating as quickly as it had begun. The Bigfoot family, now reunited and safe, began to move away, deeper into the forest. I stood there rooted to the spot until they disappeared. As I made my way back to my camp, the events of the day replayed in my mind. The storm, the screams, the extraordinary sight of a Bigfoot family, things I would never have believed if I hadn't seen them with my own eyes. I knew this experience would stay with me forever, a reminder of the mysteries that still linger in the world and the incredible bond that can exist. That night, as I lay in my tent, the forest seemed different, more alive. I felt a deep sense of gratitude for having witnessed such a moment. The Bigfoot family has shown me that even in the face of nature's wrath, the strength of family can prevail. And as sleep finally took me, I wondered what other secrets the forest held, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to venture into its depths. This story is entitled, The Lost Hiker and the Bigfoot Encounter. Thanks, Emily, for sending in this story. I always find peace in the remote and rugged terrain of the dense forest surrounding the secluded lake. I'm going to keep my name, the name of the lake, and even closest town anonymous. There's something about the thick woods, winding trails, and the sense of isolation at this location that calms my mind and rejuvenates my spirit. As an avid and experienced hiker, I often seek solitude in these woods or similar type of forest trails to escape the busyness of city life. This day was no different. I set off early, well prepared with my map, compass, backpack, and supplies. I almost always bring way more than I need, but it's my motto to be prepared. And the extra weight just adds to the cardiovascular exercise of it all. The forest was alive with the normal sounds of nature, and I felt a deep sense of contentment as I hiked deeper into the wilderness. The tranquility and beauty of the forest always captivated me, and I found myself lost in thought as I wandered along the familiar trails. But then, something caught my eye, a flash of movement amongst the trees. I stopped in my tracks and squinted, trying to make out what it was. As I moved closer, I realized it was a rouged grouse hen and a flock of chicks. This is quite an unusual sight to find a hen with her chicks. Excited and eager to get a closer look, I decided to venture off the path. After all, I was confident that I could find my way back, at least I thought. I spent what felt like hours observing and photographing the birds, captivated by their beauty and charm. The sight was so mesmerizing that I lost track of time and didn't notice how far I'd strayed from the trail. When I finally decided to head back, a sinking feeling hit me as I looked around, realizing I had no idea where I was. I found myself in an unfamiliar part of the forest, where everything looked strange and disorienting. I pulled the compass from my backpack and pinned it to my shirt. As I began walking, I noticed the needle spinning erratically. I must have been on a mineral deposit rich in iron because no matter where I went, the compass behaved unpredictably, rendering it useless. Just as I figured out my predicament, things worsened as it began to sprinkle. The cool rain lowered the temperature by at least 10 degrees. Then I noticed that the trees had moss growing on only one side. Remembering that moss typically grows on the north side of trees in the forest, I decided to use the moss as my guide. It would at least keep me heading in a consistent direction, and if I was lucky, north would lead me back to the road. As night began to fall, my attempts to find my way back became frantic. The forest, once a place of peace, now felt eerie and intimidating. My heart pounded in my chest as I stumbled through the underbrush. You can't truly understand how intimidating being lost in the forest is until it happens to you. Trying to stay calm feels almost impossible, even when you're prepared. And yes, I was prepared. It finally hit me that I had everything I needed with me. With darkness closing in, I knew the best course of action was to set up camp and embrace the unexpected opportunity to spend the night in the magnificent national forest. I pitched my emergency pup tent, a small, low-to-the-ground tent that's perfect for backpacking. It's compact and takes up far less space than a sleeping bag, making it an ideal choice for backpacking situations like this. Then I got inside my tent and unrolled the sleeping bag, climbed inside the bag, rolled up my jacket and used it for a pillow, and tried to fall asleep. It was slightly uncomfortable, but the excitement of the day had me tuckered right out, and I soon fell off to sleep. The next thing I knew, I was awakened by a scream. I sat up, disoriented, wondering who would be out here screaming in the middle of the woods. At first I thought it must be other campers nearby, and that perhaps I was closer to the road than I had realized. But then, the scream came again, loud, like a woman, but with the most amazing lung capacity. Then guttural, and absolutely bone-chilling. It echoed through the trees, sending shivers down my spine. I realized with growing dread that whatever was making that sound was not human. Panic surged within me as I fumbled for my flashlight, my heart pounding in my chest. As I fumbled for my flashlight, the darkness seemed to close in around me, amplifying the eerie sounds of the forest. I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled over me like a heavy blanket. The scream echoed once more, closer this time, and I realized with a sinking feeling that I was completely lost and alone in the wilderness. There wasn't much I could do but try to ride out the terror right where I was. I rummaged through my backpack and found my 9. It was hardly a weapon against whatever was screaming out there, but it offered a tangible connection to a false security. But I knew that running blindly through the forest was a futile and reckless move. I had to stand my ground. As the eerie screams continued to echo through the trees, I braced myself for what would undoubtedly be the most harrowing night of my life. It was surreal. The way the screams echoed through the forest, drawing closer and then fading away, only to return again with a terrifying intensity. I could hear the creature's heavy footsteps as it prowled around my tent, its presence a looming shadow in the darkness. It seemed to taunt me, toying with me like a cat with a mouse, its primal screams sending chills down my spine. With each cycle, the fear mounted, my heart racing with a mixture of dread and adrenaline. And yet, through it all, I remained rooted to the spot, unable to tear myself away from the spectacle unfolding outside my flimsy shelter. The fear reached a crescendo, overwhelming me with the certainty that I would meet my end before the dawn broke. It was the last thought that lingered in my mind before I finally succumbed to exhaustion, and darkness enveloped me once more. And then, as if by some miracle, I awoke to the gentle warmth of the sun on my face, its golden rays filtering through the canopy above. A sense of relief washed over me as I realized that I had survived the night of terror, and that a new day had dawned, bringing with it the promise of safety and salvation. I remained motionless for at least 30 minutes, scarcely daring to breathe. There was no sign of the creature's screams or the frantic movements around my tent. With caution, I unzipped the flap of my tent, peering outside with trepidation. Slowly, I emerged, clutching my 9-iron tightly. My eyes widened as I surveyed the scene before me, nothing but a well-worn trail encircling my tent, marked by monstrous footprints imprinted into the earth. With no sign of the screaming behemoth with its enormous feet, I quickly dismantled my tent, rolled up my sleeping bag, and packed my backpack. Clutching my trusty 9-iron, I wasted no time in setting off, keeping to the same direction until I finally reached the road. At one point, the thought crossed my mind to abandon my belongings and flee. But where would I go? And at this point, what was the rush? I resolved to stay calm and composed, focusing on finding my way back to safety. As I stepped onto the road, a sense of direction washed over me. Westward, nearly a mile, lay my car awaiting. The path ahead, though not without its challenges, felt like a welcome reprieve compared to the tangled depths of the forest. Yet, even on the road's relative safety, an unsettling feeling persisted, whispering reminders that true security remained elusive, especially if I were to ever again venture back into the wilderness with my backpack in tow. I still haven't the nerve to venture back into the forest for even a short hike.